Okay, so I'm going to read The Meet Cute, which is probably one of my favorite parts of any romance novel. And it is going to set up the love triangle in the first chapter. So before the scene, Lady Alaina, who's having a rough start to her season, and then you meet Christopher and Graham. Christopher is a Marquess, Graham is the Duke, and you can tell that they're best friends, so you get that dynamic. And then we move into this second chapter where essentially Alaina meet the both of them, and then that kind of sets things off.
Awesome.
Yeah, the book I really like to add a decent amount of mystery in there too. So it's romance plus mystery. There is always some of that, I feel, in historical romance, but I lean pretty heavy on that. So that's just the overall of the book.
All right. Excited. Take it away whenever you're ready.
All right. Maintaining an eye on the door, but trying to seem aloof at the same time, Elena caught an awkward stumble coming toward her. She barely sidestepped the man's bumbling approach, and her quick action nearly caused her to topple the whole refreshment table. Elena gave a quick sigh of relief when she only gave the table a gentle bump, setting the glasses and dishes on the table to shaking, but her solace was temporary. This gentleman, if he even warranted the title, had clearly been drinking too much before his arrival, and had almost caused the both of them to be covered in foodstuffs. Would the foolishness and bad luck of this season never end? Thankfully, the gentleman halted just short of the table and seemed to go about his business without a care. It was Lord Finch's drunken display and her lack of action not far from her mind that gave her the courage to confront this latest buffoon. Elena refused to be forbearing with yet another fool. Usually, a person can wait until arriving at a ball to partake in libations, Elena gritted through her teeth, loud enough that she was sure the man could hear. There are always plenty supplied at these sorts of functions, if you are capable of waiting, and you run less risk of embarrassing yourself or others. The target of Elena's remark seemed to only partially acknowledge her statement, a grunt escaping him as he continued to look at the spread of snacks, finally settling on a small candied fruit and popping it unceremoniously in his mouth. Not to be ignored, Elena stomped her slippered foot in an unladylike manner. The gentleman finally turned to face her, and Elena was taken aback by the steel blue eyes that pierced her as if they were made of ice, a small cut marring his otherwise perfect brow. Pardon my uncoordinated approach, my lady. I assure you I would never tip the table and ruin your beautiful dress. The quip seemed to insult and compliment at the same time. Elena could not be sure. Elena's initial anger turned to shock as she made note of the man's crisp speech, one certainly not marred by drink. The about face in her perception caused her words to tumble from her mouth with little thought. I was just worried that. What I mean is, the man's eyes swept the length of Elena as if finally assessing the person before him, while he pressed her to finish her thought. What? Were you worried I was already in my cups? That I am a drunk? I assure you I just slipped a bit on the floor. I'm not usually so clumsy. There was something about the man, a challenge in his eyes maybe, that compelled Elena to speak before he could turn away. Unfortunately, she could not find the inappropriate topic, and her mouth outpaced her mind. I am sure you have quite the story with your eye. Pardon, the gentleman countered, taking an ominous step toward her. Elena immediately regretted her statement, wishing to fall in upon herself as his glacial eyes once again stared at her with enough intensity to freeze her in place. Elena was taken aback by his height, finding it difficult to not tip backward to meet his eye in the crowded ballroom. He was impeccably dressed, his dark gray coat and breeches tucked into tall black boots, contrasting with a silver waistcoat, white shirt, and cravat. Elena could see that everything was expertly tailored, his coat tapering to his perfectly flat stomach, and his breeches hugging his narrow hips enough to make Elena feel color rising in her cheeks. Elena cleared her throat as she searched for her next words, coming up with only a measly reiteration of her question before remembering herself. Your eye? I do apologize, sir. I did not mean to offend. A chuckle escaped the gentleman's lips, as if in disbelief at having to converse with her, and he promptly set her upon her heels. Is that your idea of polite conversation? Yes. No, not really. It is just that it looks like it hurt, Elena stammered, standing as tall as she could manage, only barely making it to his shoulder. She refused to yield any ground, even if she could not find her voice. The man's eyes narrowed, and it felt to Alaina that many moments passed before he spoke once more. And I bet you are curious as to how I came by the injury. It seems like your curiosity got the best of your manners. Elena's disbelief at his directness caused her mouth to drop open, and she was rendered momentarily speechless. He was lecturing her. The man crossed his arms across his chest and leaned in a bit, as if to make sure she heard him. You know the saying, curiosity killed the cat. Alaina felt warmth rise to the tips of her ears, and she regretted ever opening her mouth. But then she noticed a twinkle settled in his eyes as a quick chuckle escaped his lips. He was laughing at her, or the situation. Either way, his reaction perturbed her, and she snapped. What has you so amused? The man's voice belied the twinkle in his eyes. Who says I am amused? Alaina started timidly before she squared her shoulders and pressed on. I cannot say if you are or not, but it is my usual experience that laughter indicates pleasure in something. Now the gentleman let out a more full-bodied laugh. I fear pleasure and amusement are two separate concepts, at least in my mind. Alina's brow furrowed as she mulled his last statement. The man's eyes darkened as they stood in silence, and Elena's confusion deepened. Alaina opened her mouth, but she was stayed by a familiar voice. Yoo-hoo, Alaina, darling. I simply must introduce you to someone. Alaina saw her mother fast approaching, her rich amethyst gown shimmering as she made her way through the crowd. She was joined by a stately lady, petite with lustrous ebony hair and alabaster skin, setting off her stylish silver dress. She glanced back at the gentleman and saw he was calmly waiting as if to continue their repartee, or possibly just to observe the upcoming introduction. Alas, it was time to meet the new arrivals, and she plastered a pinched smile on her face. Mother, how delightful of you to join me. I thought you would be enjoying your time with the other chaperones. My dear, as the ballroom got more crowded, you appeared as though you might be swallowed up at any moment. Charlotte looked askance at the gentleman. Not to mention, I have met the most wonderful and interesting woman, and I thought I should introduce you. Turning to her new companion, Elena's mother continued, This is the Dowager Duchess of Ashford. Alaina felt a flicker of disbelief cross her face, but quickly bowed her head and executed a graceful curtsy, hoping her quick motion covered her face and emotions. How had her mother even found the dowager at the ball, let alone garnered an introduction? It is wonderful to make your acquaintance, Your Grace. The dowager quickly took both of Elena's hands in her own, stepping closer and leaning in as if they were old friends. Please, my dear, as I have already told your mother, you must call me Eleanor. I am not one to stand on ceremony with people as long as I like them. Your mother and I were just getting equally bored sitting with the old biddies over there, and we struck up a conversation. I just had to meet her daughter as well. As you wish, Eleanor. I would be honored if you would do the same. Please call me Alaina. Your mother tells me your initial foray into society has been eventful. Lord Finch making such a fool of himself, and his sister egging him on like that. There are some in society whose manners are lacking. Eleanor paused, giving Charlotte and then Alaina an exasperated look. Alaina heard a scoff from the man behind her and felt insulted once more that he would include her in that group of ill-mannered lackwits. It was all she could do not to turn and glare at the gentleman. Without giving Alaina or Charlotte time to respond, Eleanor continued, Never fear, my dear. After the first few weeks of the season, gentlemen with more decorum tend to grace us, and the riffraff find themselves at the gaming tables instead of the ballroom. Alaina was about to respond when, unexpectedly, the Dowager Duchess peered past her and addressed the gentleman who had been Elena's verbal sparring partner. Christopher, where is my son off to? I had expected you both to be strutting around the ballroom together like a pair of peacocks. Elena's eyes widened as she suppressed a groan of embarrassment. She had been sparring with the Duke of Ashford's friend? How rude of me, Eleanor quickly course-corrected. Alaina, I know you and Christopher were speaking when your mother and I joined you, but I doubt you have been properly introduced. Christopher is not one for such formalities. May I present Christopher, the Marquess of Rochester? Christopher, this is Lady Alaina Sinclair, the Earl of Norwich's daughter, newly arrived from their country seat for the season. Alaina was glad the lighting in the ballroom was low because her discomfiture was acute. Alaina felt a raw heat suffuse her whole body, hidden beneath the midnight hem of her dress all the way to the crown of her head. She hoped the Marquis did not notice. It would not do to have him report back to the Duke on her actions. Her skin tingled with embarrassment as she met Christopher's eyes to acknowledge the introduction. What a blunder! This man was the Duke's friend, and they had been practically at each other's throats. Nice to make your formal acquaintance, my lady, Christopher rejoined. And you as well, my lord. Alaina choked out what she hoped to be a graceful response. Turning his attention back to the Dowager Duchess, Christopher answered her earlier question. Eleanor, your son left me to fend for myself just after we arrived. I am sure he will be with us shortly. Christopher finished his answer and moved his regard back to Alaina. Still embarrassed by their unfinished argument, Alaina had trouble finding her tongue. Just when she thought she might burst from mortification and rattle off something about how the weather had been so pleasant today, there was a commotion to her right. A tall, dark-haired man approached through the crowd, his all-black ensemble only broken by his white shirt and cravat, tailored to show his tall and slim frame. Based on the amount of attention he attracted just by walking through the crowd, Alaina guessed him to be the Duke of Ashford. When he quickly approached the Dowager Duchess, placing a peck on her cheek, any remaining doubt was erased. Mother, how pleasant to see you at this ball. You should have told me you were going to be here. I would have escorted you. A quick nod to Christopher and a sheepish smile seemed to convey an apology, though Alaina could not fathom for what. Nonsense, darling. I can make my own way to these events. How am I to catch up on the latest happenings if I am linked to you all evening? Eleanor seemed like she would have been tickled by the Duke's escort, but Alaina had little time to consider this. May I present to you Lady Alaina, the daughter of the Earl of Norwich, and her mother, the Countess of Norwich. The Dowager motioned to both Alaina and her mother. The Duke of Ashford's eyes lit up as he casually swept Elena's person. Alaina felt herself blush at his perusal and was captured by his rakish smile. The Duke's height rivaled that of the Marquess, and Alaina found her eyes drawn to both.